All right, let's take a deep breath, because this one deserves the proper send-off. It's the end of an era at Celtic, one that maybe flew under the radar for a lot of people, but for those paying close attention, it marks the quiet exit of a figure who was part of one of the most successful runs in the club's modern history. Scott Bain, the dependable backup, the man always ready, always present when needed, is officially leaving Celtic after 7.5 years at the club. That's right, 7.5 years, and during that time he racked up an astonishing haul of 7 Scottish Premiership titles, 4 League Cups, and 3 Scottish Cups. Let that sink in for a second. For a player who rarely made the headlines, that's a medal collection that would make most players in the league green with envy. Now, if you're someone who likes a bit of football context, and I know most of you do, those 3 Scottish Cups are 3 times more than what James Tavernier's picked up 4 times the League Cups and a full 7 times the number of league titles. That's not even a dig, just cold hard numbers, and they really highlight the winning environment Bain was part of throughout his time in Glasgow's East End. A stat I came across, no, I can't take credit for it, but I did double check, is that Scott Bain made a total of 78 appearances for Celtic. 76 of those as a starter and 2 off the bench. Now, if you're really into the trivia, those 2 substitute appearances were memorable in their own right. One came when Joe Hart was sent off at Livingston and Bain had to come on to see out the match. The other came during Joe Hart's final appearance at Celtic Park on Trophy Day, when he was subbed off in the closing minutes for a well-deserved ovation, and Bain got to step in one final time. That gives Bain an incredible average, a trophy every 5.5 games. Honestly, that might be the most Celtic stat you'll hear all week. Of course, it's easy in situations like this for people to put on their comedian hat, act like, this is some kind of earth-shattering moment for the club. But let's be real. We're not here to pretend Scott Bain was some kind of cult hero or iconic figure in the mold of a Scott Brown or Henrik Larsson, but we're also not going to brush him aside like he didn't matter. Because he did. Bain was the kind of player who might not start week in and week out, but he was always there, ready to step in, never causing a fuss, always a professional. Every squad needs that kind of guy. The unsung heroes. The ones who glue the dressing room together. And if you want a bit of nostalgia, cast your mind back to his debut. Not exactly your run-of-the-mill introduction. Bain was thrown into the deep end at Ibrox for a derby against Rangers. Celtic ended up winning 3-2 that day, and Bain had a solid performance, especially considering the context. He was called up last minute because of an injury to Doris de Vries. Yes, remember him. That's how long ago this was. Doris de Vries was still kicking about at Parkhead, and somehow Bain managed to come in cold and handle one of the tensest fixtures in the country. That was a statement moment. There are a few other memories that fans might not immediately recall but deserve to be highlighted. For instance, there's a clip floating around from the COVID season, away to Lille in the Europa League, where Bain saved the penalty. Now, I'll be honest, I had absolutely no memory of that until I saw the footage resurface online. It just goes to show how many moments big and small a player can have that go underappreciated unless you're really paying attention. But for me, the standout Scott Bain memory comes from another derby, this one at Celtic Park. It's the match where Scott Brown famously riled up Andy Halliday, prompting a bit of a melee. There's a freeze frame from that moment with Bain stepping in between them, giving Halliday this look of absolute contempt, like he couldn't believe he was even involved in that nonsense. It's a classic Celtic Rangers moment, and Bain's face tells the whole story. Now, it's one thing for us fans to talk about a player, but the real insights come from those who share the dressing room with him. That's why it's so telling that both Joe Hart and Kasper Schmeichel, 2 high-profile keepers who know a thing or two about the position, have spoken glowingly about Bain. In Joe Hart's final interview with Celtic TV, he referred to Bain as a constant in his life, someone who supported him every step of the way. That's not a throwaway compliment, that's respect. Kasper Schmeichel, who's been around elite environments for most of his career, echoed those sentiments, calling Bain a massive support and saying players like him deserve more recognition than they often get. When the news officially broke, Bain himself made a statement that honestly was exactly what you'd expect from a guy like him. He spoke about how sad he was to be leaving, but also how thankful he felt for the opportunity to represent what he called the biggest and best club in the country. He thanked the managers, the teammates, and the staff. And he made a point to highlight the Celtic supporters, saying he'd be back in the club no matter where he ends up next. It was classy, genuine, and again, that's Bane. At this point, all that's left is to cue the video montage, maybe set to diamonds or something equally emotional, and relive the best of Bane's Celtic moments. Will that video ever be made? Who knows? But if it is, he's earned it. And now comes the inevitable question, where next for Scott Bain? Does he head south and try his luck in the English Championship? Maybe a move abroad? Or does he stay in Scotland and become a first-choice keeper at another Premiership club? I'll tell you what, there are plenty of teams in the top flight that could use a steady pair of hands between the sticks. And Bain certainly fits the bill. Whatever happens, it'd be great to see him back at Celtic Park someday. Maybe playing for another team, but getting a warm reception from the fans. That's the kind of goodbye he deserves. Think about how Craig Gordon gets treated whenever he's back at Parkhead. Standing ovation, applause, respect. Bain might not have hit those same heights on the pitch, but in terms of professionalism and dedication, he's right up there. There's just something special about former Celtic goalkeepers. We always seem to hold them close. And before we move on, just one final nod of appreciation. Thank you, Scott Bain. You might not have been the headline maker, but your presence mattered. Your contribution mattered. And the history books will show you a part of a golden era for this club. The other departure making headlines, although not yet officially confirmed by the club itself, is that of Daniel Cummings, a name that's been on the radar for some time now. You might remember that back in January, there were whispers that the young forward was on his way out, but the talk kind of fizzled out after a while. That was until yesterday when the ever-reliable Fabrizio Romano confirmed that Cummings will be joining West Ham United on the 1st of July. Deal done. Medical complete. And just like that, Celtic lose yet another promising youth talent to the English system, as frustrating as it is familiar. Cummings is just 18 years old, but he's already shown flashes of the kind of ability that gets scouts south of the border raising their eyebrows. 30 goals this season. That's not a misprint. 30! And on top of that, he made his Champions League debut away to Aston Villa, a match in which Celtic were down to the bare bones and needed every bit of energy and desire from whoever was available. Even though it was a cameo, it was still a big moment for the lad stepping onto that kind of stage at such a young age. The fee. Well, it's more of a gesture than a windfall. Celtic will receive just €30,000 in training compensation. And that's what stings the most. To see a player you helped develop one that's been nurtured through your academy just walk out the door for a fee that barely covers a month's wages for a senior player. It's hard not to feel like we're on the wrong end of the deal here. Of course, this isn't the first time this has happened. And if the club doesn't change something soon, it won't be the last. Names like Ben, Doko Lagbe, and Daniel Kelly come to mind, all of them with potential, all of them given a taste of first-team football, and all of them eventually lured away by the promise of bigger leagues, bigger wages, and supposedly bigger opportunities. It begs the question, what more can Celtic do? Or maybe more accurately, what should they be doing differently? There's a strong argument that guys like Daniel Cummings should be getting more minutes with the senior team, because when they don't see a clear path to the first team, it's only natural for them to look elsewhere. But the counter-argument is one that Brendan Rodgers has made consistently since returning to the club. Ability is one thing, but patience is just as important. And that's hard to sell these days. When English Premier League clubs come knocking with the promise of top facilities, top-tier development plans, and long-term financial security, it becomes difficult for a Scottish club to compete. Rodgers is right in saying that young players need to show both quality and patience, but modern football isn't built around patience. Especially not when B teams in England's Premier League 2 are seen as better stepping stones to big careers than fighting for scraps in the Lowland League. Because that's what Cummings would have been looking at next season. Another year with a B team, maybe a few appearances in the UEFA Youth League, but likely not much more. And the question has to be asked, would he even have been ahead of Johnny Kenny in the pecking order? Probably not. And when that's the reality facing a young striker with real ambition, you can understand why the pull to England becomes almost irresistible. At West Ham, Cummings is expected to start with their B team, but that's a level far closer to first team football than what he'd get playing in the Lowland League. And if he doesn't break into the first team there, well, the English system is vast. Loans to Championship or League One clubs are common, and many young players forge solid professional careers that way. Compare that to the more limited opportunities in Scotland, and it's easy to see why this trend keeps happening. It's a tough pill to swallow though. As fans, there's always that hope that the next big star is already in the academy. We love nothing more than seeing one of our own breakthrough, a proper Celtic kid lighting up Parkhead. And while there have been a few glimmers recently, names like Rocco Vada and now Sean Ricardo being whispered about, it's not the same as having a conveyor belt of talent consistently breaking into the senior side. In the case of Ricardo, he's still very early in his development, but the hype is already there. And with good reason, he's shown a bit of spark, that raw energy you can't teach. And most importantly, he seems to understand that it's a long game. If he can keep showing quality and stay patient, there's that word again. Brendan Rodgers might just give him the pathway that others before him never had. But it's a tricky balance. Supporters want young players to get chances, but nobody's willing to sacrifice results for the sake of development. And let's not forget how these are high-pressure roles. A Celtic striker isn't just expected to play well, he's expected to deliver goals week in and week out in the league and in Europe. That's not a burden you throw on a teenager lightly. So maybe the system isn't broken, maybe it's just harsh. And maybe the harshness is what makes the ones who do succeed even more special. But losing players like Daniel Cummings still hurts, because it's not just about the player, it's about what he represents. A future that never got the chance to happen. In any case, we wish him well. Nobody wants to see a young lad fail, and there's every hope that he thrives in England. Whether he eventually makes it into West Ham's first team or ends up carving out a good career elsewhere, he's earned the right to chase his path. But as he goes, it leaves a space behind, one the club desperately needs to start filling, with talent of its own. Now moving on to the transfer front, and there's some fresh noise around a familiar name, Mathias Kvistgaarden, the Danish striker from Brøndby. Reports from the Daily Mail say that both Celtic and West Ham are in the mix for the forward, with Eintracht Frankfurt also showing interest. And let's just say if Frankfurt are in for him, and they've done us a few favors in the past, may 2022 ring a bell. Maybe we step aside gracefully this time. Or maybe not. Kvistgaarden's numbers are strong. 23 goals and 7 assists in 38 matches this season. That kind of return in a league with a fairly similar profile to the Scottish Premiership is no joke. And at 23 years old, just called up to the Denmark senior squad, he's hitting the kind of age where you want to see a striker really start to dominate. Celtic were reportedly interested back in January, but if we're being honest, this might be one that got away. Now that Premier League clubs are sniffing around, it becomes much harder for Celtic to compete. Not just on wages, but on the overall package. Still, the fact that we're even linked shows there's awareness inside the club that we need a striker this summer. Dyson Maeda looks set to be used as a winger going forward, and with Jota unavailable, there's even a case to be made for signing another wide man. But up front, that's the area screaming for investment. Some might argue that Adam Maeda did enough last season, and sure, 20 goals is a respectable return, but if the club really wants to push forward, to dominate domestically and make an impact in Europe, then a marquee signing a striker could be the game changer. You think back to the likes of Moussa Dembélé in 2016 or Odsonne Edouard in 2019, players who took this team to another level entirely. That's the kind of impact we're looking for. And Kvistgaarden seems like the sort of player who could fit that mold. But if it's not him, the hope is that Celtic have other names lined up, because the need is real. The summer window is here, and if this team is going to evolve into something special, it starts with getting that number 9 position right. Before we proceed, subscribe to our channel and enable notifications to receive all exclusive news about Celtic FC. Don't miss any details about your favorite team. It's extremely important for Celtic FC fans. In a twist that few in Scottish football could have ever imagined, the rumour mill is in overdrive, with whispers suggesting that Greg Taylor, the Celtic stalwart, could be on the verge of a jaw-dropping move across Glasgow to arch-rivals Rangers. A move of seismic proportions. If it materialises, it would not only send shockwaves through the Scottish Premiership, but would also shatter the hearts of Hoops faithful who have long adored the left-back's dedication and tenacity. Word on the street is that Rangers have quietly been monitoring Taylor's situation at Parkhead, with insiders hinting at discreet approaches being made through intermediaries. Though there is no official confirmation from either club, or indeed from the player himself, The mere suggestion of such a switch has already sparked outrage among Celtic supporters, who view any defection to Ibrox as nothing short of betrayal. Taylor, who has been a regular fixture in the Celtic starting team since his move from Kilmarnock in 2019, has played a pivotal role in the club's domestic dominance in recent years. His consistent performances and unwavering work ethic have made him a fan favourite. Yet football is a game full of surprises, and should the jurors put an attractive offer on the table, it might prove difficult for Taylor, or indeed Celtic, to resist. Social media has been ablaze with divided opinions. Some pundits have labeled the rumor as nonsense and paper talk, designed only to stir controversy ahead of another tense Old Firm clash. Others, however, claim there's more to this story than meets the eye, pointing to recent contract uncertainties and squad reshuffles at Celtic Park as potential indicators that Taylor's days in green and white could be numbered. If such a dramatic transfer were to happen, it would rank among the most controversial in recent memory, rivaling the likes of Mo Johnston's infamous switch in 1989. For now, the footballing world watches and waits as the possibility of Greg Taylor donning the blue of Rangers remains. Just that, a possibility, but one that few would dare to completely dismiss. Hello, fans. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel, as it means a lot to Celtic FC. Also, share your opinion about the news in the comments below. See you in the next video.